So while working at Bethesda, there was a lot of instances I came by where people would say stuff on the internet, whether about the industry, video games, particular games like Bethesda games, and I thought that some of those takes were the dumbest things I have ever read, but being at the company, I had to hold my tongue. Now I don't need to, now that I've left. And this recent take that I saw about Starfield is probably one of the silliest things that I've read in a very long time, and I feel this need to respond to it because some of the stuff in this article is just like, it boggled my mind, and a few people on Twitter referred me to it and they felt similar. So in this video, I would like to provide a response and provide my take in terms of what is actually being said in this article about Starfield and also about Fallout 4, because that was the topic. So if you're going to enjoy this video and this take, please like it, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, and please consider supporting me on some of my other social media platforms like Patreon, all of which are linked in the description below. So, with all that out of the way, let's get to the content. So, the take that I am talking about is in an article on CBR.com, and it is entitled, Starfield's dev diaries indicate the game may suffer the same fate as Fallout 4. Bethesda's descriptions of Starfield may suggest that the sci-fi RPG is heading down Fallout 4's path, something that should concern fans. Now, let me be very clear at the beginning. I'm not saying that anybody should go to this particular author's social media or whatever it is and send nasty things their way. Absolutely not. They are just sharing their view and their opinion, and we need to respect the ability for them to do that, right? Especially on a public platform like the internet, obviously. But I very much also have the right to respond to what this person is saying, and how I just vehemently disagree with so many of the things that are mentioned in this article, both about Starfield, but also about Fallout 4. So first of all, let's give credit where it's due and just go through what Tyler has said and what this author on CBR.com has said, and then I'll respond in kind. So, the article starts off by saying, Starfield is shaping up to be gaming's biggest blockbuster of the holiday season, but Bethesda's recent dev diaries on the game bring back bad memories of Fallout 4's shortcomings. Excessive hype towards video games that ultimately disappoint sadly isn't a rarity anymore, and Starfield could be heading in that direction. I'll continue. I want to respond to that so bad, but I'm going to continue. In Bethesda's latest dev diary, the lead designers, directors, and artists behind the game discuss the innovative design decisions that excite them the most about Starfield's world. They mention that players can join various factions and even play the double agent working for one side while passing off information to the other. Another mechanic they highlight is Starfield's dynamic companions that express how they feel about the player's actions as they follow them on their adventure. Both features sound fine on their own, but the problem is that everything they've boasted about are features that have already been done before. Bethesda's last game, Fallout 4, also had multiple factions, which were present all throughout the Wasteland. In fact, the concept of factions is something that Bethesda has implemented as far back as The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind in 2002. Prominently seen in Horizon Forbidden West and Dying Light 2, working with factions has become an open-world cliche ever since. The double agent angle isn't new either, considering Fallout 4 allowed players to infiltrate the Institute faction while secretly working with another faction for the majority of the main plot. The same deal goes with the dynamic companions, who've also been around since Morrowind. Fallout 4's dynamic companions even exhibited the same expressive features, which let players know when they didn't like certain actions, such as stealing from others. It seems that Bethesda is trying to sell off old ideas as new again, and it's concerning because it mirrors the same mistakes made during Fallout 4's development. Fallout 4 was its year's most anticipated title, and though it was generally well received by critics, fans found it underwhelming due to how little it evolved from Fallout 3. While quality of life improvements for looting and shooting were abundant, it basically only gave players more Fallout 3 but with lackluster writing. What made this stagnation more apparent was the release of The Witcher 3 earlier that same year, which advanced the open world RPG genre in terms of storytelling, combat, and exploration. In comparison, Fallout 4 felt like a game made in a vacuum, where the developers weren't taking note of the genre evolutions that came between the release of Skyrim and Fallout 4. Skyrim was a genre-defining game for its time. However, Fallout 4 was simply more of what Bethesda games already do. So far, Starfield looks like it's falling into the same trap. Gamers now live in a post-Elden Ring world where mystery lies behind every corner and players have complete freedom to discover as much as they want. The open world genre has had its lid blown off thanks to Skyrim, Breath of the Wild, and now Elden Ring. So if Starfield can't keep up on the innovation front, it's doomed to fall behind. Bethesda has an opportunity to learn from other developers' design choices regarding exploration and deliver on storytelling and player choice in ways that Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild did not. If Starfield can find ways to evolve the genre and stand out in a crowded field of open world epics, it will live up to its hype. However, Starfield's current trajectory indicates that Bethesda may not have learned from Fallout 4's issue, instead just offering players a Fallout game set in space. Alright, so if you can't tell, I have a lot of issues with this particular article about Starfield, and I just want to go down the list one by one and address the things that stood out to me. The first thing is the author's suggestion that Bethesda Game Studios in this latest Starfield dev dive, simply talking about the existence of factions in Starfield, is somehow them trying to pass off old ideas as new. I genuinely don't know what was going through the author's mind when they wrote this particular line. And that's because, yes, we all know that factions in video games is not a new concept, right? They date back so far. The author himself admitted that Bethesda games and factions are like part and parcel. They're one and the same. You go back as far as Morrowind, as I said, you're going to find factions. There were factions in Skyrim, factions in Fallout 4. Heck, there were factions in Fallout 76, right? It's not, a new feature that Bethesda is bringing to the table with Starfield, of course, right? Everyone knew that. But simply them talking about factions in Starfield, to me, wasn't them trying to boast about it or trying to pass off an old idea as new. It was simply them confirming that factions are going to be in Starfield. Like, what more do you want them to say? It would be weirder, in my opinion, if Bethesda Game Studios, throughout this entire marketing process of Starfield, did not mention factions once, and did not mention once that factions were going to be in Starfield. That would be stranger to me, because then people like me and other hardcore Bethesda Game Studios fans would be like, what the hell, Bethesda? Where the hell are factions in Starfield? Why aren't you talking about them? And that's another thing that I have an issue with about this article, is that the author believed that Bethesda Game Studios was boasting about the fact that factions were in Starfield. How else do you want them to say it? How else do you want them to confirm it? This is video game marketing 101. Whether it's in a tweet or in a static image or in a video or a podcast, whatever, what have you, game developers are going to have to list the features in their games, right? That's how they promote their game. That's how they communicate to fans that this is what's going to be in the game. This is what our game is going to be about. How else did you want them to confirm the fact that there were factions in Starfield? How? Because I looked at that Starfield dev dive and I was like, yeah, okay, they're going to be factions in Starfield. Here's how they're going to work very roughly. They didn't get into specifics, but to me, they just confirmed that fact. How was it seen as boasting? Like, I don't know what kind of, it's a bit mean to say maybe, but what kind of warped mindset you must have to look at that and think that, yeah, Todd Howard and Bethesda Game Studios was boasting about how they had factions in Starfield. I didn't get that sense, and I don't know how anyone else is going to get that sense from that Starfield dev dive in and of itself. Like, Todd wasn't being cocky about it. The team wasn't being cocky about it. Yeah, sure. The videos that they're making, they're very nice, clean, professional. They look very like they're on a professional set. And maybe this is slightly different to how some games are marketed, right? Maybe, I can give you on that point. But to me, that doesn't come across as like, being boastful or come across as being sitting high up on a pedestal or anything like that. They just wanted to go with this particular vision when it came to these dev dives for Starfield, because they're not showing off gameplay right now, so they needed something else. Like, I didn't see that as them being on their high horse or anything like that, or being kind of thinking every other game developer was lesser in terms of how they were developing their games. That's just what they've done. So I don't understand how anyone can see that video and think, why are they boasting about the fact that there are factions in Starfield? That didn't make sense to me whatsoever. Alrighty, and the second issue that I had when it comes to this article was this author's opinions and comments about Fallout 4. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to try and sit here and tell you that Fallout 4 was one of the greatest video games of all time, or it was genre-defining or anything like that, because to be honest, I don't believe that it was either. Yes, I enjoyed Fallout 4. For me, it was a solid game, I had fun with it, but I probably don't look back on that game as fondly as I do Fallout 3 or some of my other favorite video games of all time, right? And I probably wouldn't put Fallout 4 in my top 5 or let alone top 10. But I do have the general view that I believe people are way, way, way too harsh on Fallout 4. Now, let me kind of set the context. I'm very well aware that there is this harsh divide in the community when it comes to opinions about Fallout 4. And I'm being very general, okay? I'm overgeneralizing, I know, but very roughly, let's say it's this. Let's say it's a lot of old school, kind of, tried and true Fallout fans that came from, whether it's Fallout 1, Fallout 2, or maybe 3 or New Vegas. Those kind of old school Fallout fans, they came to Fallout 4 and thought, this is a really dumbed down game. The RPG mechanics were dumbed down. The character specking was dumbed down. I didn't like the voice protagonist, all that kind of stuff. A lot of those kind of older school fans or those more traditional Fallout fans saw those changes and didn't like what they saw, didn't think it felt like a Fallout game. And I totally understand that. But then you got the other side of the equation of more of the mainstream fans that, yes, Bethesda was actually trying to appeal to make Fallout 4 a better sold game overall. And they absolutely achieved that if you actually read the articles and the numbers about Fallout 4 sales, right? You've got those kind of more, the masses, the more, mainstream kind of gamer that picked up Fallout 4 because they heard about it from a friend or saw it recommended or whatever, and just enjoyed the game for what it was. It was a nice, fun time, open world RPG. You got to shoot things, you got to level up your character, you got to talk to characters, have companions, all that kind of stuff, storytelling, side quests. You know what I mean? I generally believe that there's that big split when it comes to Fallout 4, and there's probably a lot of people in the middle as well that, whether you were a mainstream fan or even an older school Fallout player that just thought it was a fun time like me, a good time, but you wouldn't write that much home about it, right? So I totally understand that. But I still believe that people are being way too harsh on Fallout 4. Was it genre defining, as I said? No. Was it game of the year even in that year? No, probably not. Like, I would say there were probably other games in that year that were more game of the year. But let's not pretend that Fallout 4 was this horrible game that had really awful writing, and it's dealing with factions, and how it incorporated factions was like crap. And I think people are way too harsh on that game. So when I read this author's opinions about Fallout 4 and how negative they were about that game, let's not pretend that Fallout 4 didn't sell incredibly well. Let's not pretend that Fallout 4 on Steam has a very, very positive rating, both overall and also recent. Let's not pretend that there is this huge audience of people that aren't on the internet and that aren't old school Fallout fans that didn't think this game was actually amazing. If you actually talk to more lay, casual video game players that played Fallout 4, there is a lot of love out there for Fallout 4 that I think people do not appreciate. Again, I'm not dismissing any of the concerns that older Fallout fans have, because I have them too. Do I want a voice protagonist? No, I don't want a voice protagonist in my Fallout game. Do I wish that the character specking, etc., was more like New Vegas? Absolutely I do, right? But still, I'm not going to be that harsh on the game and say that it was bad, or say that it did factions poorly, or that its writing was absolutely crap. Was it as good as it could have been? Probably not, but it wasn't fucking awful. So this article, I think it blew it way, way, way out of proportion when it comes to just what they thought about Fallout 4. I thought it was completely uncalled for. And also as well, I really want to know what this author was thinking when they said that Fallout 4 was just more Fallout 3. Because that is not the issue that I saw people had when it came to Fallout 4. If anything, people were like, Fallout 4 made too many changes, that they deviated too far from the traditional Fallout path. Again, the voice protagonist, the kind of simplicity of the characters and the specking, and the removal of skills, all that kind of stuff, right? That was the issue with Fallout 4. It wasn't that it was more Fallout 3. I think a lot of people would have loved more Fallout 3. If Fallout 4 was just Fallout 3 times 10 or times 100, it would have been one of my favorite games of all time, period. Fallout 4 was actually a very different game to Fallout 3 and especially New Vegas. Like, I'll give you one example. Fallout 3, probably the best Fallout game in terms of feeling like an apocalypse, feeling like a wasteland, that kind of dread that you felt every time you walked anywhere. I wish Fallout 4 had that, but Fallout 4 was a completely different direction. It was no society's rebuilding, here's a lot more color in the world. Like, that was different. That was not just more Fallout 3. I really want to know what game this author actually played, because to me, that was the big issue that a lot of people had with Fallout 4, is that it didn't stick to the traditional path, and that it didn't just offer more of what, Fallout fans had come to enjoy in the past. So, yeah, man, I read that and I thought, that doesn't make any sense at all. Am I wrong in saying that? Like, you might think that Fallout 4 is a crap game, and I understand that that's your opinion, and let me know in the comments below. But at the very least, do you agree with me that the issue with Fallout 4 was not that it was just more of the same as Fallout 3 or New Vegas? It was the complete opposite. It was that it did stuff so differently to those games. That's what old school Fallout fans had an issue with when it came to Fallout 4. I don't know. I'm just babbling at this point. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and I'll get to the conclusion. Alrighty, Waysanders, that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.